This is your April 20th, 2026 Indigenous Emergency Management briefing for information and news you can use with regards to what's going on with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit briefings around emergency management. And where I'm going to start off today is I'm going to be going through this kind of order. I'm going to talk about the flooding that's going on because there's quite a bit of activity over the weekend. We're going to get into wildfire situation update, as there's been a lot of wildfire danger growth within the Forest Wildfire Weather Index. And then we'll get into some of the public health infrastructure news that's out there. And of course, at any time, if you are Indigenous and anything in this briefing, is triggering for you and you need any kind of mental health, I just put in the chat the Hope for Wellness helpline for First Nations and Inuit for immediate mental health support. So where we're going to start off, and then also I'm going to be doing a quick demonstration of our HazardScape app that we did a bit of a soft launch last week. So I'll do a run through of the tools and some of the things that we're adding onto that. So you'll be able to kind of get a first glimpse at what we're doing. So I'm going to go into our flood map. And I'm going to pull up current conditions. So yeah, top story for flooding. Flooding is now confirmed in Peguis First Nation. That's Peguis is one of Manitoba's largest First Nations. They declared a state of emergency and they're finalizing its evacuation plan. And the Nation Chief Stan Bird says his community, they're located 180 kilometers north of Winnipeg. They'll certainly see the nearby Fish River rise in the coming days as well. And I'll talk a little bit about what's going on in Fish River Cree Nation. And Chief Bird says the severity of flooding will depend on how hot temperatures get. So the flood expected to hit Peguis Nation is considered to be a 1 in 100 year flood, which is significant. That 1 in 100 year mean every year there's a 1% chance that the community will flood at this level. And the Fisher and nearby Icelandic river basins are expected to peak between April 23rd and 28th, according to provincial flood reports. So Peguis Nation leaders say they're expecting 2014 flood levels. But the worst case scenario could be as bad as 2022, when 1,000 people were forced to evacuate and more than 700 homes were destroyed. So the community has a population of 10,246, with about 3,800 living on reserve. And this is following years of promises of permanent flood protection for the nation from the Crown. The community is once again bracing for potential spring flood without those protections in place. And there have been 5 major floods in Peguis since 2000. So multiple federal politicians have acknowledged the need for long-term solutions. But I would say there's been several federal politicians over the decades since they relocated the nation that have been promising that. So I'm just going to see if I can, I don't know why the flood, oh, there we go. The flood data is now populating. So if we look at Peguis, the red is that, and that sort of yellow, that's where the floodwaters are likely to hit. That's kind of within the 25-year to 100-year return period. So the red is 25, the yellow is 200. So I don't know why they don't have better coloring for the 1 in 100 year return period on this one, but still it's quite extensive. Now heading over to some updates on Fish River Cree Nation. They've also declared a state of local emergency, which was effective on Saturday. And that enables the nation to mobilize resources, access emergency funding from Indigenous Services Canada and the province of Manitoba, and enforce mandatory evacuations if necessary. So Fish River is also, you can kind of see the red there. That's kind of best case scenario flooding for them. That's the extreme risk 25-year return period. So you can kind of expect that a lot of the roads are going to be cut off. And, you know, the critical need here is evacuating at the right time, because as those highways are obviously flooded out, then you're not going to be able to get out. So that's, you know, it's a high risk situation. And if Pegwis does see those 700 homes, that same kind of number of flooding again, that's a massive recovery for a flood. It's a nasty recovery, because so much of that silt, so much of that mud and dirt can get into the homes. You have sewer backup. Everything's got to be changed out if sewers are backing up, even just a little bit, even if an inch of sewer backup water touches a desk leg or the bottom of a hockey equipment bag, that is then considered contaminated with sewer water, and you want to replace that, or in some cases it can be cleaned. But if it's a soft good that absorbs fluid, then you definitely want to replace it. And if it's a very important family heirloom, then in a lot of cases what you want to do is you want to get it into a cooler, so the degradation of material kind of slows down until it can be restored properly. So yeah, they're going to see a lot of potential issues there with the recovery side of things. Let's go on. One we've been following a lot here, Kashakuan First Nation, they're now facing a double crisis, because not only are they part of that water treatment plant failure, they now have a spring flood risk on the Albany River. So evacuees from that First Nation are going to be displaced from their homes for at least 3 more months, right? So we're looking May, June into July, probably early August. The Cree First Nation, located near the James Bay coast, is in Northern Ontario, has been in a state of emergency since January. And they've also had 90 people that have been exposed to crypto through the untreated water. So now that with this new threat and flooding from spring breakup along the river, that's when ice is at the river's, you know, head melts, it raises water levels and can block the flow of water. The nation's executive director, Tyson Wesley, says ice is thicker than normal this year, which increases the risk. Vulnerable people still in the community will be sent to Ontario communities already hosting evacuees, including Niagara Falls, Kingston, and Kapuskasing, if I got that right. So they're continuing to lobby the government and try to get that situation rectified, because it's not good for them, and I feel for them. Dabwi. Is that like, I don't know what that one is. Is it Mish? Oh, Mish Wesley. I think you're helping me with pronunciation there, I think. Moose Cree First Nation, Ontario, James Bay, they're also doing preemptive evacuation planning. So the risk of flooding is prompting their chief and council in Moose Cree First Nation to prepare to airlift its most vulnerable citizens out of the island community in James Bay. People with complex health conditions, mobility issues, and children, or anyone who would feel safer out of the community in case of a flood, are encouraged to volunteer for evacuation. Everyone in the community must register in case there is a full evacuation. Their population is 4,000. So I would recommend, again, I always recommend to First Nations that when they do those pre-evacuations of elders, vulnerable people, children, you all decide to go as a family unit. Don't let your elders or vulnerable people go alone, because that is often what happens, and you get separated for long periods of time. Oh, you're from Cache and outside the community on camping grounds. My family came back from Niagara Falls. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that your community is going through a lot. So that's that's awful. And you know the recovery, just you have to kind of think right now with the floods. If Peguis, Fish River, if Moose Cree First Nation, and now what's going on with Cache, you know, if we're talking flood recovery for all those communities, we're already, I mean, you could probably average, if it's just a minor flood, $10,000 to $15,000 per home in restoration. If we're talking full like 3-4 feet of water in a basement, we're now looking at, you know, what anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 per home. And that doesn't include all of the personal items. So if you're in a situation where your house is flooded, or even in Cache where you're now, you know, you've been out of your home, I don't know for how long, for months, you want to make sure that your nation is bringing in the statement of claim process from Indigenous Services Canada. I'm sure they will. But as homeowners, as people who may have damaged furniture, clothes, blankets, traditional items, you know, like I always say, start creating that list now of all the items in your home, right? You want to have a list and pictures of everything, because if you're evacuating and your house is flooded, you want to start the process of collecting and listing everything in your home. So when you get back home, you can validate and go through everything, because it can take a while, right? It's not always easy to remember everything that's in your house. And even if you make the claim for damage or loss, you're still going to remember things later in the year, right? Maybe Christmas comes up, a birthday, an anniversary, and you go to get some decorations or you go to get something and you're like, oh shoot, I forgot we had this and we didn't put it on our claim the first time. So you want to make sure you've got pictures, things like that of everything in your home for that claim process. And you want to also talk to your nation about understanding what that process looks like, because the application forms, you can get them through Indigenous Services, through your nation. Your nation can get them from ISK now. They can send you copies so you can understand what they look like. And you just want to prepare as much as you can now to make those claims to replace all of your all of your items. So just focusing too really quickly, Southern Ontario, they're having quite a bit of flooding, as well as the spring melt and heavy rain continues to swell waterways. So Midden Hills Municipality of Central Manitoulin, they've all disclosed flood emergencies, states of emergency due to extreme flooding. There's, you know, finally, it looks like if we go to the weather outlook for extreme weather, that's wind. You know, there isn't, the only extreme weather that we've got flagged right now is Newfoundland, Labrador area, where they're still expecting significant snowfall, but at least for now, no extreme weather other than this one little tiny spot in Manitoba there. They got a wind warning, but at least for now, the precipitation is subdued, which, if you joined us on Friday, I'm going to show you, we're going to switch over to wildfire. And I'm going to show you something quite unbelievable, because this is what I kind of said on Friday. So if we look at, here was the fire danger on Friday. This is basically a general indicator of how easily a fire may ignite in forest vegetation. So this was Friday. This is what it looks like today. So you can see there in BC, Saskatchewan, you know, Western Alberta, Southern Alberta, starting to move into South Saskatchewan. It's moved from, you know, low to moderate to high to very high down in Southern Alberta. So I'll zoom in a little bit there so we can see at least Western Canada. And that's only going to continue to kind of grow out. If you look at BC, like almost 50% of the province is in a moderate to high fire danger right now in April. And southern Alberta, it's starting to creep into southern Saskatchewan is at a moderate, right? And that's, as the days progress over the next 2 weeks, we're going to see most of this map turn to blue into green and, red, extreme. So where you see the yellow and the brown and the green right now, that's all probably going to be red in at least a couple weeks, if not sooner. And then also as we move east into Atlantic Canada, despite all of the rain that they're getting in southern Ontario and Quebec, they've now moved into a low fire danger. So regardless of all that water, the waterways are flooding. Okay, you have to think about the rivers and the canals and all of that are flooding, but all of the topography, all of the land that is above that is now at a low fire risk. So don't let the flooding in southern Ontario kind of fool you to think that wildfire risk is not present. It is present in the higher ground areas that aren't receiving all of that precipitation and retaining it. Then we've got in Atlantic Canada, of course, they are now moving into a low risk as well, which is a bit of a shift up over the last few days. Now, if we move over to any new starts, we did see in BC this one at Merritt. It kind of popped up again to being held. There were a couple of starts on Vancouver Island, but luckily nothing too major going on across the country over the weekend. There was not a lot of new fire starts, or there wasn't any at all. New Brunswick is still seeing a couple spots that popped up, but they're all under control. Not very well. This one's a decent size near Fredericton, 7.7 hectares from April 20th. It started overnight. So, those ones, at least they're being held. Nothing's out of control right now. Alberta, a lot of this is still from 2025 hotspots that they're still recording. And then luckily down in that really dry part of Saskatchewan, nothing as of yet. But definitely want to start thinking about, how your area is going to start to increase in fire. So in fire risk. So if we look at, let's go to British Columbia. Warming temperatures in BC will accelerate snowmelt and increase spring runoff. The province is urging people throughout BC to prepare for potential spring flooding, drought, and wildfires. Right? There's 3 in 1 for you. The BC government is working closely with First Nations and local governments to prepare for the upcoming spring and summer hazard season. BC Wildfire Service is forecasting an elevated risk for extreme or difficult to control wildfires. Okay, I'll say that again. BC Wildfire Service is forecasting an elevated risk for extreme or difficult to control wildfires in some parts of the province this year, including the Northeast, Chilcotin, and South Thompson regions. What else do we got here? So BC, in New Brunswick, the province launched wildfire season early due to dry winter conditions and announced 6.7 to support firefighting and preparedness. In BC, the wildfire service forecasts elevated risk. And I said that already because it's on the same news report. Okay. So in terms of what to watch for this week, that we're going to be focusing in on, definitely Peguis First Nation, Fish River peak flows, Fish River Cree Nation, their evacuation, Kashukuin First Nation, Moose Cree. Those are the 4 I'll be paying most attention to in terms of the flooding. And then Ottawa River watershed, BC's early wildfire season. And then we've still got those ongoing mental health crisis in Nelson House, right? Those, that is still a big issue that's going on. So yeah, if you have any questions in the chat, pop them in. I will be uploading this briefing recording to our YouTube, the Hazardscape homepage. So the first thing when you go to hazardscape.com, it will be on the homepage, and our Patreon with the Word document, which I'll show you here, which is a briefing of everything that we're watching across all news channels, APTN, CBC, Indigenous. Where else am I grabbing stuff off of here? Canadian Press, Winnipeg Free Press. So all of our briefings have all of the sources so you can go in, because I always like to say that this briefing is compiled through all of these. But each nation still needs to, take a look at their own risk and look at it from their level as well. Okay. So this is going to be available for download on our Patreon. Let me take a drink of water. I was never born as a radio host, but sometimes I don't know how they trained themselves for this. So other sections I wanted to go into that you can start looking at now is also, as you're starting to plan your evacuation, use P-Post. I'll say that one more time. Use P-Post. And I'm going to give you a really quick rundown on P-Post right now and how you can use this as a basic planning tool to help deal with some really quick issues in your planning. And I've got this worksheet. Let me find it. Is posted on our Patreon. So if you want this worksheet, you can grab it from there. Munyao should have pulled it up before he started this, but I forgot. And I forgot where I saved it. Oh, I know where I can get it. So here, this will be a good opportunity to show you this, because then so when you go, if you're a member on our Patreon, which the link is in our bio, and you get to our Patreon page, what you'll do is you'll go to our collections or posts, and I think I've got it in the basic emergency management. Actually, I've got it in I know it's in the 2026 wildfire evacuation simulation. And there's a tutorial here on P-Post planning methodology. And in there is a PDF quick reference guide, this one right here. This is what P-Post is. So, priorities, problems, objectives, strategies, and tactics. And when you go down, you go into the worksheet, and it's a fillable PDF. I'll move it up here. It's a fillable PDF that helps you really go through a very quick planning process of all of your priorities, all the problems, all your objectives, strategies, and tactics. So for example, what are your priorities during an evacuation? Right? Life safety. Get elders out of the community, get vulnerable people out of the community, get children and families. A priority is keeping those family units together. And I'll keep repeating this. If your community has an early evacuation option for elders and vulnerables and children, if you're part of that family, go with them, because if they go off on their own, or even with one family member, the chances are later on you're going to be evacuated to different places, and it's going to be really hard to reunite. So if you can, stay together as much of a family unit as possible, because I've seen so many times in First Nations, elders go ahead with one caregiver. They go down to Winnipeg, And then the rest of the family has no choice but to go to like Niagara Falls or another community, or one goes to Vancouver and the other in Kamloops. And they're disconnected for months or weeks and very difficult to reunite. So go as a family unit. So life safety, priorities, get elders out, get everyone evacuated safely. You want to go, what are the problems with evacuation? Not enough lodging, not enough hotel rooms, keeping people together. Maybe you don't have a registration system set up. Maybe your evacuation route is cut off, right? Just list all those problems. Don't even think about which one is the worst problem. Just get all the problems out. Then, based on your priorities, which problems align to your top priorities? So which problems align to life safety? Which ones align to getting people out? Which ones align to getting people registered, right? Which ones align to getting your lodging and hotel? All right. Organize those problems in a priority. Based on all the problems you have for that priority, you want to get down to one objective. So your objective might be secure lodging for all pre-evacuee members by April 22nd, 2026. That's your objective. You don't put any more detail in your objective than that, because you want to delegate that objective to a team. They will figure out the strategies and tactics. As an incident commander, as an emergency management coordinator, as an emergency operations center director, when you get to the scale of having a large emergency operations center team, your job is not to figure out the who, what, when, why, or how, and all the tactical details. Your job is to get to an objective. So the objective, get accommodations for pre-evacuees by April 22nd at 12 p.m. That objective goes down to the team. What strategies are they going to use to get that objective? Well, hotels are a strategy. Airbnbs are a strategy. Going to a neighbor community to set up cots in a community center is a strategy. Renting a well site group lodging camp is a strategy. Not the best one, but it's a strategy. Then you want to get into the tactics. What will you use to do all of that? Well, you're going to sit down as a group. You're going to make phone calls. You're going to check websites. You're going to contact through mutual aid or agreements, right? You're going to make phone calls, start booking, see what's available. Those are the tactics. Maybe early on in your planning, you created a strategy for that, which is engage with a humanitarian organization that does evacuation, registration, and lodging. That could be your strategy. So your tactic is then activating them and getting them to implement that plan. But in the absence of any plan, in the absence of any course of action for a particular situation, this P-post methodology is quick. It gets everything out there and it gets people working at the tactical level quickly. So that's my mini lesson for this morning. You can find that all on our Patreon with a video that walks through that entire process if you need a reminder. The other thing I'm going to show quickly during this is our new app that we're soft launching through our Patreon. And if you are an on reserve emergency management coordinator or fire chief, and you want to check this out and you're not on our Patreon, well, you can go to our Patreon and sign up for free and get the link to this, or you can just direct message me on TikTok and I'll get you a link. But I'll show you really quickly what this is here. This is what you would see as a user. So this would be your dashboard. And what it is you've got a on-reserve fire services assessment tool, on-reserve organizational resilience assessment, on-reserve emergency management program, on-reserve disaster recovery planning, and an emergency management assistance grant writer tool. And at the top, you have these badges. So as you conduct these different assessments, you earn a badge as for completing the fire assessment. You get an emergency manager badge, EM, emergency management leader, and then community resilience leader if you complete them all. And as you fulfill the assessments and the gaps and the priorities and do your project management and get grants, you kind of level up through this badge system. And you'll see on the menu here, this is the menu. Like I said, all those links are to all of the resources there. But I'll show you what the emergency management one looks like. So you can see at the top, you've got a progress line. And you've got, I got to renumber these. I don't know why I started them at 4, but program management, planning, implementation, evaluation, management, review. You start in program management, and basically you just start answering all of these questions on your current on-reserve emergency management program, whether you're conforming, partially conforming, non-conforming. And you can add in some information. So for example here, senior leadership, chief and council or equivalent governing authority has formally authorized and endorsed the emergency management program through a resolution, band council, BCR policy or equivalent. So you could put in here, yes, we have a band council resolution signed, like let's say it was September 2nd, way back in 2007. Right? And you could put it's, outdated and does not have any current, names or roles in it. Okay? Indigenous governance integration, including chief council, elders, clan mothers, equivalent, tribal mothers, however you want to call, whatever you call them for your community, are integrated into emergency management. So maybe that's partially, and you can explain, we advise with some elders, we do have a committee. You put in whatever your situation is, and you go through this assessment, and there are specific areas that are identified as Indigenous related. So the Emergency Management Committee includes Indigenous knowledge keepers, elders, cultural advisors to ensure cultural perspectives and traditional knowledge inform programming decisions. If you put conforming, you don't have to add in there any names. You don't have to put in any, traditional knowledge, anything like that if you don't want to. As long as you mark it as conforming, then you've met that. And you basically go through this assessment through all planning, implementation, right? And then you run the summary analysis, which it can take it can take a minute or two. So don't worry if it's not popping up. It will come. And you can export this in an Excel or a PDF. And I know a lot of nations out there are starting to use ChatGPT to do plans. I know that a lot of them are just kind of going onto the free version, or they might even have the low end subscription. And that helps. However, the difference here is one, our app is hosted and all the data is in Canada. We are moving over to Cohere, which is a Canadian-based AI. And through this app, you're going to be, oh, it didn't work. Oh, hang on, there we go. So this is what the report looks like. Okay. You get an assessment summary with all your detailed answers. Okay. For the record, you've got that. You've got an Excel that again is helpful for project management. It gives you all of this here, every question you answered with the requirement, the status, and any of the comments you entered in, again, for project management. And I probably didn't put in enough in this one to give you the AI assessment because it's only 3% filled out, but I can show you with a fire report what the assessment, it's going to look very similar to this. So with your emergency management program, you'll get a executive summary, you'll get AI insights, you'll get strengths and critical gaps with detailed recommendations and action steps. And then you can formulate and start to do your project planning around this. Now, the key is you only have to enter all of this in once. And it's there for as long as you have an account. And then what we're building is you can see there's a EMAP grant writer. All of the assessment data that you've put in across fire services, emergency management, organizational resilience will all be pulled into this grant writer. So you can then apply for EMAP and non-structural mitigation program funding based on all of your assessments. And then you can choose what the priorities are that you want to put your money towards and project manage it. So this has not been 100% tested yet. This is basically an automation of what I do as a human. When I talk to a nation and get an assessment from them and get information from them, I just do it through my own mental methodology and help write a grant, like through Word document, format it. But now we're just taking that process and automating it. And the really helpful part is when you run through this assessment, and let's say in a year, what's a good example? Let's say under planning, formal planning process used. Maybe last year it was non-conforming. You weren't using a formal planning process. But after a year of working and getting some grant funding and getting one in place, you can change that to conforming and run the report again, and it will update your output report and your priorities and your funding priorities. And you can do this in real time. So as you're going along in the year, you just keep updating this assessment, and it keeps updating your project management and everything in real time. So now through this, I sincerely think that on reserve, fire chiefs, emergency management coordinators are truly going to be able to spend more time out in the community, in the land with the people than at their desk doing reporting and grants and paperwork. I think through the fire assessment, the EM assessment, the org assessment, and if you can get into the disaster recovery planning one, you will save months of time every year. And you will be so far ahead of all the other departments. They'll be wondering why and how did you do all of your ISK reporting and all your grant funding reporting and all your CNC or reporting to your supervisor. They're going to be wondering how, one, you do it so quickly, how it's consistent, right? That's the big key. You're going to be reporting the same data and information in the results every single reporting period. And this will be saved for years, and you will get so much data and information after you go through this system for a couple of years. You will have the most organized, well-documented emergency management system there could possibly be. And we are adding a community vulnerability risk assessment that is going to feed into all of this. And it's super comprehensive. It's going to look a little bit tedious at start to fill it out. But if you can put in that upfront work, then you'll never have to do it again until you go and update these little bits and pieces. But it's also very good for knowledge retention, because if a fire chief or an EM coordinator moves on, you just have to train the next person on this, and all the data and information is saved there, right? Plus, you've got all the links to the resources, and we're going to be adding more features into here as we get feedback from the community. So, like for example, already, we're doing these little tips of the day up top. Today's is the Build Back Better principle, means using disaster recovery as an opportunity to reduce future risk, rebuilding infrastructure to higher standards. And you'll get your badges. So these badges, if you're an emergency management coordinator or fire chief on reserve that is looking for a way to measure and support your staff or your teams in career development, like as they go through this application and do the work and earn a badge, they will only get a badge if they filled in the assessment, they have an understanding of emergency management, they've gone out and collected the information and made improvements. So if someone in our system has an emergency management leader badge, you're going to know exactly what they've had to do to get that. And you're going to see those results in the community, right? So this is kind of almost like a micro certification process through hands-on work and learning. You're not going to be able to, you can't game the system and fill out these assessments with just anything. I mean, you could go put in a bunch of gobbledygook and get it, but you're not going to see the results in the community. You're not going to have the mental knowledge to demonstrate that you actually learned and did it, right? So unlike, training courses where you go in and get training for 3 days and you walk out with a certificate, you walk back to your desk with that new knowledge, having to do all the work, and you're unsupported. That trainer is likely gone. All of the materials they use for the training, other than the student handbook, is gone. This doesn't leave you. When you do an emergency management program assessment and you're thinking, okay, what is emergency management planning again, and what are all the parts of it? And where was I working, and what is this, strategies prioritized by risk and feasibility? What does that mean? It's all right here. And you've got your notes from where you're at. And you've got a report. So, yeah. And again, something that I'm very proud of personally for doing this is we're being very open and transparent on the data. So our platform is designed from the ground up to handle only operational and administrative data, not your cultural, spiritual, or traditional knowledge, not your sacred data. This app does not need your sacred, I call it sacred data, because your sacred data stays in community. It stays in your stories. It stays with your people. You take this and you have those sacred conversations, right? And bring in all of those elements. I mean, if you want to put it in here, you can. We are OCAP compliant for First Nations data information. And nations have the ability, through what's called an API key or an application program interface key, to download all of their data out of this and delete it and export it, and it's gone off the server. And I know people are always probably like, yeah, okay, but is it really ever deleted? Well, yes, because it's my server. I know how it deletes. It is gone. And nobody else can access it without your API key, which can only be generated by you, and only you have it. It's like a password with like 75 characters, right? And that's the only way it could ever be retrieved. So we're working on security first, online security first, and then the assessments and all of that were done as kind of follow up. So we're going to be formally doing a lot of launching of this on our Patreon with explainer videos and training for that assessment. And along with our briefing today, if you're just tuning in and you did miss it, this is being recorded and it's going to be on our YouTube, our Hazardscape homepage, and our Patreon. So if you do have any questions as well, like pop them into the chat. Very happy to answer any questions, or if you want me to focus in on something, then I can take a look at it as well. But again, when we're looking at that fire danger, don't let all the precipitation and flood fool you, because it is pretty dry out there. Few other really quick announcements. We've got this podcast with Terrence Bear from Saskatchewan up on Always Moving Forward, Indigenous youth. We have his podcast with Stacey Dorr on Indigenous culture and emergency management. That is dropping tomorrow. And then our Indigenous-led change management with Tanya Tuorgo. Sorry, Tanya, if you're watching. I forget. I'm not gonna. Eagle Feather Woman is her name. She did a podcast with us on Indigenous-led change management and the work she's doing. And that is up on our Spotify, YouTube, and Patreon as well. So lots of resources and tools out there for you to grab onto as you prepare. Also, as we move into this season, preparedness around evacuation. Make your evacuation grab and go checklist now. What are you going to grab and go if you have to evacuate? Doesn't necessarily mean you have to pack it all right now, but having a list, figuring all that out, thinking about it now can be very helpful. And then when the time comes that you need to collect it all and put it in a bag or a box or in your vehicle, you'll have it. Know your evacuation routes. Understand where your community evacuation routes are, and understand if those evacuation routes are being hindered by the hazard. So for example, when we look at our flood mapping, even I know a lot of people in the communities are, know this, but it's also good to walk through, because there might be youth and people that don't know it. So again, when we're looking at the flood conditions, and I'll use Peguis as the example because they're in real time. They know in the local community that the flood is going to take out a lot of their roads, but do new teachers in the community, do new workers, do people there to help know that? Do the youth know that? Like, maybe somebody just got their driver's license 6 months ago. And do they know that the highway is at a risk of flooding, which makes egress and evacuation, cut off at some point? Is that impact being communicated to everybody? Right? That's what you want to make sure is going on. And if I would say right now, if I was Peguis, Fish River, like being told by the province that flooding risk is so high, right now in the Emergency Operations Center, I would have a disaster recovery planning team stood up. I know, even if it's one or two people, I know during response, you've got to put all your resources to the response and you've got to put all your priorities to the response. But if you know that you're at a flood risk of 700 homes being flooded, you have to start your re-entry and recovery planning right now. Actually, it should have been started 6 months ago, but right now, because if you can kick off your recovery planning, now it's going to make re-entry for members a lot more smooth, because you're going to be able to start getting in the resources you need in place to get them home and make it safe. Whether that's contamination testing, restoration, critical service priorities, making sure that you're prioritizing, public works and infrastructure staff ahead, right? Even knowing what if all of your public works staff, what if all their homes are damaged? What if all your plumbers don't have anywhere to live? All that planning starts today. And I can't stress that enough. So disaster recovery planning is almost at this, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, we've been planning for disaster and emergency response for decades. We're very good at that. We have the tools and the resources and the incident management teams and the understanding of emergency and disaster response. Where a lot of governments and communities don't have that understanding is disaster recovery. And that's got to start now. So if you have any questions on that, put them in the chat. What is this that you're talking about? This is our morning Indigenous Emergency Management Daily Situational Awareness Brief. So this map you see right now is the flood risk, current flood risk conditions for Peguis First Nation and Fish River First Nation. And earlier, we were checking out weather statements and new wildfire startups and the fire danger, which is here for the country at this current moment in time, which even if we wanted to look at this one here is the fire weather index formally. So it's the last map I showed you was fire danger, which you can see it's kind of in the same. It just gives you a little bit different presentation of the type of data. So even if we look at like fine fuel moisture code, this is why you're seeing those areas. So fine fuel moisture code is a component of the fire weather index. Yes, this is live right now. This is all real-time data. It tracks the moisture content of the very fine dead surface fuels that carry surface flaming in a conifer forest. Yes, this website is live right now as of April 20th. And why this is important, right, is because that fine fuel moisture code is a component of the greater fire weather index, which really is everything that you need to consider. Right? Thanks for sharing the live, Grassroots. Appreciate it. Because if you go back, I don't know if this is in the center of the screen. If you go back and listen to the podcast I did on why the Jasper fire was so devastating, this is really important, because especially for First Nations. Canada, provinces and territories, they have wildfire projection models. Okay. And those fire projection models are based off history and how they think fire should behave. Now, if you're Indigenous, make this into a video to post later. Oh, hi, Grassroots. Yes, all of these daily situation briefs are recorded. and they're posted within an hour and a half on our Patreon, Hazardscape homepage, and YouTube channel. So you can go back and see all of last week and every morning at 8:30 a.m. So Jasper did not follow Munyao colonizer fire predictions because Munyao think fire is just a thing. They don't see it as a living, for lack of a better term right now, entity. Fire is alive, right? And First Nations have an understanding of fire. It is fire, like I'm not speaking for First Nations here. I'm just kind of ad-libbing what I'm told by the people I work with, but they know how fire behaves and what it is. It's not something you can necessarily control or try to control, right? And Joe, I don't know if you're being like a racist Munyao here. Yeah, the understanding being we like to light them. Oh, you like to light them. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, why does being First Nations matter? Because First Nations have knowledge about fire and the land and the world that science does not. And going back to my example with Jasper, Jasper had 6 lightning strikes that on the surface at the fine moisture level, those fires connected within 48 hours and turned into a crown fire in that time. So Jasper the Jasper fire behaved in a way that nobody predicted and nobody ever thought could happen. The fire moved from a surface level fire to a crown fire in 48 hours, tore through the tops of the trees into the town. The fire model predictions did not predict that, and nobody really kind of thought that it could happen. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, grassroots. If you go back to, if you look at our podcast from the Salish Firekeepers workshop I attended, I did what I learned from that from Elder Joe Gilchrist, talking about fire as a First Nations right and why it's important that that right by First Nations peoples allowed to be used, for lack of a better term, because they understand the importance of fire keeping the planet healthy. And I think he used a measure that he got from some elders saying, we know we've done our job when we can walk on the land in bare feet. Right? So I love that measure. But yeah, that's why kind of like, even though this is the fire danger and it indicates other things like, here's the drought code right now for extreme drought, right? All this data is telling us kind of what we can expect. Here is the probabilistic forecast. Displays at each location the probability for the most likely tercel category of the forest severity rating. So what does this one mean? This should not be used alone to predict if any area will have above or below average wildfire seasons. This is kind of just showing some probability of lowest, normal to high, above average values. What else can we look at here? Forest severity anomaly. The category of the forecast severity rating determined by the percentiles of historical forests forecast from 1991 to 2020. So yeah, this is probably a lot of stuff that isn't super helpful. I think what's the most helpful is wrapped all into one, the fire danger indicator, which here's even the blue, right? Blue is low. Can you overlap previous fire years? Yeah, I can overlap them in this one. oops, where we go. So here, so those are all nation lands. Like red is reserves, purple is Inuit. Then you've got like agreed upon lands and settlements up there. I'll show you historical perimeters. So I'll remove the indigenous lands, but this is the historical map of wildfire. Right? So you can kind of see where it's been concentrated in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, north. Just last year alone, if you want to look at like last year, that was last year. I'll just flash it. And then this is historical. Where are you? Do you want to say where you are? Lac La Ronge. Oh yeah, Lac La Ronge. Yeah. I think it's in that area, right? I'd have to put on my yeah. So it's it's like that was last year, and then yeah, this is the historical, right? So there's been lots. Like you can see where all the wildfires have been since recorded history. And the black ones are those are all map pins of people that have come on our TikTok to indicate where they're from. So yeah, it's kind of it's a lot, right? That's last year. So this one is active. If you go on our Patreon, well, actually, I'll start direct. If you go onto our app, right, you can get all the links for these resources. And I'm not publicly. You're welcome, Grassroots. I'm not publicly giving out the link right now. But if you want to DM me for our app link, to get all the links for these resources and these maps, you can send me a direct message to the Hazardscape TikTok, and that will give you the access to this. And you can grab all of the resource links here. We've got the active wildfires, wildfire smoke, drought monitor, flooding, wind. Like if we wanted to take a look at the wind, right, and the temperature, you can do some forecasting. So currently, as of today, this is what the temperatures and the wind are. And as we progress into like Tuesday, we're going to see those areas in Canada where it's going to get a little bit more warm and dry. And then as we go through next week, we see some cooling. Right. So we're going to see some increased fire risk, but it'll dissipate a little bit. We don't have the forecast yet for up to Sunday, but that changes. So this week is going to be a bit of an elevation in fire risk, and then we're going to go down a tiny little bit. But right now you can see why we're kind of, that warming trend. So this is another good tool. If you've got a wildfire in your area, you can go in and project the wind. So if we, go into Saskatchewan here, you can see the wind. Those little things are pushing the wind. If we want to go to Wednesday, like you can see how the wind changes. We want to go to Thursday, right? That's how the wind changes. And you can take all of that knowledge and data, and that's all incorporated into the fire risk models, right? Thank you for the likes. Appreciate it. And you can get pretty accurate. Then if you use fire smoke, right, there won't be a lot. But if we go into the US, you know, you can see where they do have some fires. You can see where the smoke is pushing right now. And again, if I pause it there, that's the smoke cover projected for tomorrow at 9 a.m. Okay, whereas this smoke here, that's right now, but it does a projection. Let's go see, what is that little fire there in Edmonton? This one won't tell us. Let's see if it's on the actual fire map. It's not pulling onto this one. Let's see if we can pull it onto on Canada's map. Oh, that's the interactive one. Hang on. Let's see. Let's see what this one tells us. Alberta RF 2026. So that could be, that could be a hotspot picked up. You have to, when you're using these different maps, like this one is for a smoke forecasting. So this one is pulling from, it's called Esri. It doesn't, let's see if it adds a layer. Let me see, mate. Let's check the Alberta. You have to check where the maps are pulling from their data from, because different maps pull different data for different uses. So this is the one in Alberta. So nothing right by Edmonton. This is like an old one from 2026 that was in January. So on the smoke forecast, it's not, I don't know where that data is coming from. But I go to the trusted source. So here's Alberta wildfire. Oh, there's one there. Is that it? No. Whitecourt. Yeah, there isn't anything there. So you kind of have to use different resources. Thank you, Grassroots, for that gift. So when I teach how to pull all this data together, you want to have a suite of trusted sources, and then you want to go through all of them, because it gives you a little bit different picture and view, right? Because they all have different databases that they might pull for. Like I find this one through the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center, like it looks really good, but you know, like these are all from 2025. Like, why is it only reporting for Alberta and not the rest of the country? And like, why are they there? They're monitored, under control. But then I've seen like here, like there was a fire in Labrador here, like for a couple of weeks, but now it's gone. And I just find that this map, like I'll use it, but then I go and validate it with the provincial data for each province or the federal data. Because usually the government will pull from they should be pulling from a standardized data methodology. Whereas when you look at like firesmoke.ca and Windy, they might be pulling, they're like kind of not government sources. They're kind of open source maps. And you just want to validate, where it's coming from. That's all. Just be safe with it. Yeah, and then the drought map too, that won't be updated probably until the end of April. It'll probably be early May. Right, which gives us, again, this was published end of March, and you can see, right, April 20th. Look at where those brown spots are. And you can correlate that to I lost the that's over here. This one, right? You can kind of see the pattern, right? Like where the drought is, it's dry, obviously. So yeah, you can get all of these. If you want to DM me for a link to our app that gives you a direct access to all these maps just in one place, send me a DM. And if you're an on-reserve fire chief or emergency management coordinator, you can request to try out the tools. And we're just doing some beta testing. So we just ask for your feedback, and we'll do some follow-up with you on how it's working out and things like that. And then you can go onto our Patreon later today and you can download our briefing note here in a Word document, because this briefing will be recorded, and you can get all this information. All the daily briefing notes are available for download. And the recording of this from start to end is on our YouTube, Patreon, and our homepage at hazardscape.com. So yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know. Shoot them in there. And yeah, we'll be doing this as long as we can keep going. It's free to listen to, but it's definitely not free to make. So we're trying to find different sources of funding because we're not funded by the government. We don't have any grants or anything like that. We're doing this kind of trying to generate, sponsorship and have some relationships with communities and contracts where we can be supported in everything that we do and keep delivering this. So we're 100% community funded in that regard. That's what that's what allows us to produce all the training, all of the resources and templates that we're putting out. Even the app, right? Even our app is being developed through community input. So really the model is we're just hoping if nations use it or fire chiefs or EM coordinators use it, we're only trying to generate enough money out of this to keep it maintained, and it's not expensive, right? Like to maintain this app for for every First Nation across Canada, like $5,000 a month. $5,000 a month would keep this app available and open to all First Nations emergency management coordinators across Canada. Keep it up and running, keep the servers running, keep updates to it, get feedback, make improvements, make it better, make it more valuable. So that's like how many First Nations are in Canada? 647? Is that right? Someone correct me. Oh, really? Like let's say 600 First Nations. So $5,000 a month times 12 is $60,000. And you divide that by 600 First Nations, that's $100 a year. You need to make it $100K a month, and then government. That is the horrible truth. If I came out and said this is $100,000 a month, the ISK would probably say, okay, we'll fund it. I know it's ridiculous. It's the stupidest. Ah, man, I know. It's so horrible. And that's why we're trying to get rid of like a lot of the really expensive consultants, right? Because again, yeah, the Alberta government would love it private. Well, but here's the thing also with this one. You know why the government would love this? Because then they have all your data. Right? If the government of Canada or the provinces and territories had this app and all the nations were feeding into it, They would know more about your communities than a lot of the people in your communities. And they should not have that data. Right? And so First Nations have to go to their provinces and territories and say, look, we don't want you to hold our data anymore. We don't want to have to submit in detail our data to you for your decision making. We now have a tool that collects a lot of data, information in a consistent way that we're going to use in community to make decisions. You need to trust that and just give us the damn money. That's right. That I know that's how it should be. But getting to that, I think, through data sovereignty for First Nations is doable. Because you no longer need the Crown to collect and monitor and manage this data. First Nations used to need, big corporations, big consulting firms to come in and do a lot of this. They don't need it anymore. This app could be copied and a First Nation could have their own instance of this app. And if First Nations want that, they can contact me, and I'm happy to work with them on that. Right? If they say, you know what, Brad, we don't want HazardScape to run this for us. We want to have it in our community under our enterprise system. Then all of the code and all of the implementation for this can be downloaded, no problem, and installed, given the IT security stuff that the nation might have. But in the absence of that, this is available, and there's an API key for nations, and it's all hosted in Canada. None of it is crosses the border into the US. We work with OCAP through the First Nations Governance Information Strategy for ownership, control, acquisition, possession of First Nations data, including sacred data, stories, cultural sites. That's why I always say on the homepage, there's a clear line of what we collect. We collect operational administrative data. Your sacred data, if you choose to put it into a system, fine, but it's not necessary. You'll have companies out there tell you that, your cultural sites, your Sundance grounds, your, whatever, your sacred grounds should all be mapped and cataloged. But again, where does that data go and how is it used? Right? That definitely has to stay in community. So yeah, it's important. And there's other things too, like I'm looking at, if you've ever heard of Meshtastic. I don't know if you've ever heard of Meshtastic. It's an app, open source free app, where you can create long range communication networks that don't rely on power or cell towers or Wi-Fi. I think they would be useful for First Nations in very remote communities in case of a cell tower going down, a major power outage, no internet for a long amount of time. I think First Nations could set up a Meshtastic in their community for very, very, not very much money. You can make a little bit better network using APRS radios. The frequency would fall into like the 915 megahertz, so that range where it's publicly available. The distance depends on how many nodes you have in the network. From one node, if it's a pretty clear line of sight, you can get about 2 to 6 kilometers. But if you have a node in between that and in between it, the longest low range mesh message transmission on record is 331 kilometers. That's very difficult to achieve. But if you have a small community with, say, 3,000 homes, and if you were to set up these low range nodes on a pole with a small solar panel, you could easily have a off-grid text messaging communications app working for like $1,000, maybe $1,500, and it's all run off solar and very low maintenance. And that would give you enough to be able to send short text messages throughout the community on your phone. Now, you have to have some protocols in place that, it's not to like use for saying, hey, come over and enjoy some bannock. Because if you're just using it for conversation, the bandwidth is really low and it can muddy up the network. It is encrypted, so the Meshtastic is encrypted at 256. Frequency jumping, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you could, I don't know enough about APRS yet, but if you need to get that secure, then you're gonna need to bump up your technology for sure. But if you're just looking for a very secure, encrypted, long-range communications off-grid network that can run in an emergency, yeah, well, you will. I know. And I know you laugh. I kind of would have laughed at that earlier, but given Mark Carney's morning little speech yesterday morning, I don't know if you watched it, but given Mark Carney's address yesterday morning and the fact that he's committed to doing them kind of, it sounds like every couple of weeks or 3 weeks or monthly, like I think he's building up into a briefing platform, like a briefing rhythm that is used, during like crisis. So I kind of don't, like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist type that level, but definitely when the prime minister of the country is putting $83 billion into defense, well, I think they're seeing the US fascism growth, and I think they're starting to see the fascism in Canada grow a little bit beyond their liking. And yeah, I think all the signals, the $83 billion in defense, Carney going around creating partnerships quickly, very quickly, with India, Australia, China, Japan, Norway, Sweden, like Scandinavia. Very quickly, like that guy didn't even stop during the Iran invasion. He didn't even stop and come back to Canada. He kept going to build partnerships because he knows that's more critical right now. And now they're putting in some legislation to make it a little bit easier for the government to gather some online information. I think that's all kind of leading to this idea that they're definitely, they know that the relationship with the US is no longer going to be salvageable, right? And this is all leading to kind of like a increase in sort of a little bit of crisis management on the government side. So it'll be interesting to see what his live updates over like the next 3 or 4 or 5, kind of how he manages them, what he talks about, what kind of message is he giving? Is it fearful? Is it hopeful? Is it strategic? Is it rooted in evidence? Is it Like, you know, or is it like going to be turned into like a propaganda machine? Right. I don't know. We'll see. I don't I don't necessarily enjoy it when leaders like that have to come out on a regular basis to update the country, because I believe in more like the government should be able to provide the data and the information that and the intelligence people need to make their own decisions without a lot of government sort of interference in terms of how they interpret it. Like they can keep it at like an international level, but for community level, regional level, we'll see. We know Carney's also very conservative. Well, yeah, but I think Carney's a conservative. He is kind of, yeah, like I think Justin Trudeau went for that loved icon leader. He tried to do that. He failed, obviously. Carney definitely, I think, resonates with sort of that maybe 45, age 40 to 65 maybe demographic. Like he really resonates with the capitalist crowd. Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely not looking for significant sort of global social change. He is seeing the world as it is and operating within that system. So I don't think we can expect anything socially better to come out. Like he didn't talk about healthcare. He didn't talk about the health crisis in Canada right now. Like he didn't talk about that. Maybe he will in the future. But if he didn't talk about it first, it's not a priority for him. And with the opioid crisis and the healthcare and stuff like that that's going on, I would like to see the government put a little bit more of a priority on healthcare and mental health and the addiction crisis and stuff like that. But I think they're just full blown right now defense and infrastructure and economy, which doesn't always lead to healthier communities. Well, you have to have a country for anything. True, but we do have a country, right? We can't forget that. I think we do have a country as not as great as it is and how much better it could be. We've had a country for a long time, and the healthcare and the social aspects have just not come to fruition because of these multiple disruptions we've had, right? It's been really hard. I get that. So it's again, it's going to be, oh yeah, we're a very young country for sure. We are still a baby. And I think that's what a lot of this is, right? We're not like in our 1500th year, like a Sweden or Norway. Like our culture is it, like it's very hard to, like, we're still like lumberjacks and maple syrup and logging, right? Molson Canadian, I am Canadian. You know, we haven't fully adopted enough Indigenous culture, but yeah, our culture is very young, and that's why we don't have that civil defense kind of, I think, loyalty that we see in Norway and Sweden and some other countries where the young people are in the streets rooting on their military and wanting to like join in, right, to protect their country. We have pride and stuff, but we're not at a level of civil defense like I saw in Sweden, where everybody is trained and has a cache of equipment in a sea can in their neighborhood ready to defend or deal with a big disaster. So all stuff to watch out for. Yes, they have very mean neighbors, and they're still very embedded in World War II outcomes, right? they all are still living with the impact of World War II right next to them, and it is not forgotten there. We don't have that kind of same influence or urgency. Like I was in Buda, Norway, up here last year for the Arctic Emergency Management Conference, right here. This town, before the Nazis left, they annihilated it. Like like except for a couple of buildings, that city was completely flattened. And if you go there today, it looks like Edmonton. Like they built it up that quickly, and they have no intention of like losing it again. So that's a really strong sort of sense of civil pride and defense, because they know that at any given time their neighbors could come walking over in there. So we now have that, right? We now have the US is our kind of bad neighbor, and we need to deal with it. So I think whatever we see out of that is I don't know. We'll see. All right. It's 10:15. I think that's gonna be a wrap. I'm gonna get this recording downloaded and posted for those that missed it. Again, if you'd like to see this recording, it'll be on our YouTube, hazardscape.com, and our Patreon. Patreon link is in the bio with our briefing note. And if you want to get on our new Hazardscape app and take a look and access all the web links for all of our data and everything that we're showing on the maps, you can request that through a DM or sign up free on our Patreon and get the link there. All right, everyone. Thank you for your time. I will be back tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time for our next briefing and updates on floods, fires, wildfires, all that stuff. Take care, and we'll see you tomorrow.